With Chapter 10, we have some added content. Recall this cycle involving ATP and muscle contraction. You can go through that cycle in a previous video. However, this cycle tells us that the myosin head cannot detach from actin without ATP. So here we have a contraction. The myosin head moved actin. Call it the power stroke. Now that myosin head is stuck there, but when ATP binds to the myosin head, it detaches it from the actin binding sites. So, I believe I did mention this in the video, however, there was no text, which is why I'm bringing it up now. Rigor mortis is when a deceased animal is not producing ATP, and that explains why rigor mortis occurs, because muscles are contracted because no more ATP is being produced to remove the myosin heads from actin. We also went through the three sources of generating ATP in our body, and what's added is this section on muscle fatigue, and I added it in conversational style, complete sentences, just so I can read it here. It's not point form. Intense muscle activity results in oxygen debt, the amount of oxygen needed to compensate for ATP produced without oxygen during muscle contraction. Oxygen is required to restore ATP and creatine phosphate levels. It's needed to convert lactic acid to pyruvic acid, and in the liver to convert lactic acid into glucose or glycogen. Other systems used during exercise also require oxygen, and all of these combined processes result in the increased breathing rate that occurs after exercise. So until the oxygen debt has been met, oxygen intake is elevated, even after exercise is stopped. Then we have two more slides added here, one on endurance or aerobic exercises versus resistance exercise. So let's go through this. So with endurance or aerobic exercise, our slow oxidative fibers are dominating, that require little force but involve numerous repetitions. So that's what endurance is. The aerobic metabolism used by slow twitch fibers allows them to maintain contractions over long periods, aerobic or endurance exercise. So it makes more efficient slow twitch fibers by producing more mitochondria to enable more aerobic metabolism and more ATP. Increases the amount of myoglobin in a cell, as increased aerobic respiration increases the need for oxygen. Endurance exercise also triggers the formation of more blood vessels, capillary networks around a fiber. We call that angiogenesis, formation of vessels, to supply oxygen and remove waste. So all these cellular changes result in the ability to sustain low levels of muscle contractions for greater periods without fatiguing. So endurance or aerobic exercise is doing all this to train our slow oxidative fibers to be more efficient so you can perform these light intensity activity over long periods of time. However, resistance exercise is different. They require a large amount of fast glycolytic fibers, and they're producing short, powerful movements, but they're not repeated over long periods. So these are explosive types of activities. Sprinting would be one. The high rate of ATP hydrolysis and cross-bridge formation in those fast glycolytic fibers result in more powerful muscle contraction. So with resistance exercise, this is what's happening. It affects muscles, increases the formation of myofibrils in the muscles, therefore the thickness of the muscle. That added structure causes hypertrophy, which is enlargement of the muscle. So we're not increasing the number of cells, increasing the size of the cells or muscle fibers themselves. And because this muscular enlargement is achieved by adding more proteins, athletes trying to build muscle mass often ingest large amounts of proteins. Tendons become stronger to prevent damage as they pull on the skeleton. And the force produced by muscles is transferred to tendons that attach the muscle to bone. In the section on overuse says, if done improperly, resistance training can lead to overuse injuries of the muscle, tendon, or bone. These injuries can occur if the load's too heavy or if there's not enough time for the muscles to recover in between. Cellular damage to muscle fibers occurs after intense exercise, includes damage to the sarcolemma and myofibrils. That muscle damage is when you feel sore after strenuous exercise, but the muscles gain mass when they're repaired, and more structural proteins are added to replace the damaged ones. So overworking muscles also lead to tendon damage and even skeletal damage if the load is too great for muscles to bear.